Like moths to a flame, you've thrown caution to the wind for a glimpse into our world. Well, now you're in it.
Welcome to Effed Up Stories.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the last episode of the Near-Death Experience week that we have going on. I am your host, Will Pender.
And I am your co-host, Ryan Sharp.
And tonight's episode, you will be visited by three ghosts. But really, I'm just going to read you three different near-death experience stories. If you have an effed up story of your own or a paranormal picture or something of that nature, we'd like to get it from you. We'll get it on the site and into a podcast. You can do that by visiting our official website, which is effedupstories.com. That's effedupstories.com. So be sure to do that. And we're specifically interested, we'll put whatever you got up there right now, but if you have any experience, like maybe you were in the military, or you worked at a top secret base, think Area 51 or Dulce or something. If you have some kind of a top secret conspiracy laden kind of a thing, we want to do another themed week on that. So if you have those stories, we ask that you submit it. It'll make for a nice change of pace. I think it'll be a fun week. And with that said, we're going to jump into the last episode on our near-death experience week. And I'm going to start with the first story that I came across. So two of these stories are stories that I came across that I found really interesting, that aren't on all the mainstream sites as the most profound ones. And also there's a fan submitted one, which we'll do last. So the first one involves drunk friends who are drunk driving. So right off the bat, we know that's not going to have a happy ending. Okay, so this story comes from a 21-year-old man. It was May 8th in 1966, and he had just finished his final exams for his senior year of college. He had a roommate whose name was Brett, and he described Brett as having, he was really short, he had a big nose, bug eyes, long hair, and a mustache. He also described him as being quite racist. He cheated his way through school, and he was a drunk. He obviously had some good qualities, though, because they were friends. And but he described Brett as having like a dark side to him, mostly in the way that he would treat people, women in particular. But despite all of this, he described Brett as a ladies' man. So it doesn't matter that he thought he was gross looking. He was quite the ladies' man, always had a lady on his arm. So anyway, on this particular night, he was out with Brett and friends, and they were all drinking quite heavily. And he said he doesn't remember much of that night, I guess due to the drinking, but he does remember getting into Brett's car, which was a brown Toyota Corolla. So you can kind of see the writing on the wall here. We have two very drunk guys, one who's driving the car, Brett, and Brett was painted to sound pretty reckless regardless of his whether he was sober or drunk. So anyway, he said that Brett was driving like 50 miles per hour on the roads with a 20 mile per hour limit. So this is not kilometers, this is miles. Of course, he was doing so very drunk, And, the guy who was telling the story, who's never revealed his name, by the way, he does remember telling Brett to slow down, because his reasoning was that a cop was going to pull them over and they were going to get in all kinds of shit. But Brett made some remark to him about being a bad front seat driver. And then the inevitable happens. A set of headlights quickly zooms towards them and they hit head on. And the guy who was telling the story said he remembered flying out of the car and hitting the ground, his head hitting the cement. He said he couldn't feel the rest of his body as he started to go in and out of consciousness. During this time, he heard an officer say, "He's dead." And he instinctively knew the officer was referencing his friend Brett. And the driver of the other vehicle was dead as well. And he said the last thing he remembers here, while he's conscious, was being rushed in an ambulance and someone telling him to hold on while a doctor was saying that they were losing him. And next, he hears an NDE staple. This is actually something we probably should have mentioned in our podcast on the near-death experience elements. But anyway, he heard a roaring, buzzing sound, and that's something that a lot of people hear before they have a near-death experience, is this really loud buzzing sound. It could start faint and roar up, but essentially that's what they hear, like almost like a bunch of bees are in their ears, or static. Anyway, he heard the sound, and just as quickly as it roared up, he popped out of his body, and he found himself floating above it, looking down at how badly damaged it was as the doctors were trying to revive him. And he was able to move just by mere thought alone, and he could read everybody's thoughts. And another common feeling he described was that he felt as if he were far more alive in this state than he ever did in his physical body. And then he decided that he wanted to leave the room he was in. Something, as he was trying to do this, though, something froze him in place. And then he heard a sound similar to an aggressive rushing wind. And then he saw a mass of darkness approaching him. And when it got close enough, he was quickly sucked into this mass. Okay, so once inside of it, he realized he was somewhere else, in some sort of tunnel. And to me, I think, he's referencing the void here. But anyway, while he was here, he heard the sounds of crying and groaning, and then guttural screaming that was worse than any he had heard before. And as he reached the end of the tunnel, he saw his friend Brett. And Brett was being tortured by some monster, perhaps a demon, that he described as half human and half animal. He said the face looked somewhat like a possum, but the body was human. He said Brett saw him, and he began screaming for his help as the monster began to laugh. And it was then that he looked around and noticed that there were many people being tortured. And he described himself as an observer, but like as if he were in some kind of invisible bubble of protection. But he was a spectator, and he was unable to help in any way. So, he began screaming for someone else to help his friend Brett. But of course, nobody came. And then the demons, or whatever they were, they ripped Brett's clothes off. And he could see that Brett's skin was singed with burn marks all over. And Brett began screaming for Jesus to help him, as one demon held him down and another began to rape him. And all while this was happening, Brett just looked at his friend, wondering why he wasn't helping him. And this went on for a while until Brett went quiet for a spell. And this was the first time that he was quiet during this whole encounter. And he said that he went quiet because he sensed something even worse was coming. And he said terrible sounds of agony fell over them at a distance, as humans, terrible, hateful humans, marched in, and they grabbed Brett, and they put him up against a wall bearing an image of a red cross, and they clamped him in it, and then they began to nail him to the cross, one nail at a time, as Brett screamed in agony. And at some point, one of the men of the group noticed the spectating friend and ran towards him. And it was at this time that a woman named Emily appeared and intervened, stopping the guy in his tracks. Apparently, Emily was a woman that he had cared for in a nursing home in life. And she told him that he was safe and that the others couldn't get to him. And so he asked if she could help his friend Brett, and she said that she couldn't. But she did say that Brett would only suffer for a short duration. And following this, he found himself back inside the Black Mass with Emily as he explained different, she explained different things to him. And she said that she would be waiting for him there when it was his time. And then he began to hear someone saying, "We got him back," and boom, he was back in his body. So one thing to point out there was that, she apparently looked like she was in the prime of her life. So when he looked after her, she was in a nursing home. She was old, and you know what happens to our bodies when we're old. But this is another commonality, is that when people see people on the other side, they're apparently in the perfect age, the way that they look the best, the prime of their life. And a thing that Ryan mentioned in our last episode about how it seems like similar souls or the same group of souls stick together through many lives. Here it seems that the narrator of this story was tied to this woman, Emily.
Even in his afterlife.
Even in his afterlife. So in his present life, he had cared for her at a nursing home. That was their relationship. And in the other side, they obviously had some tie because she was going to be waiting for him when he came back, right? So why not a relative? Why not his mom? Why not, Jesus or God? Well, for him, it was this person for whatever reason. I guess only he will know when he finally passes over, for good, right? So that's that story.
I guess the possibility there that Emily may have been his mom in a past life, or
could have. Well, that's just it. Could have been any character, but the same souls seem to stick together. That's the important underlying feature here. So the next story I'm gonna tell you guys about is one that I found. And you'll notice that I'm reading a lot of negative, scary ones, but that's because it's effed up stories, not soothe your pain stories.
Feel good stories.
Yeah, this is meant to kind of make you feel on edge. Hopefully it does. Now this one comes from a woman named Veronica Barthel, and there's a section of the story, I'll tell you when it happens, that stuck with me, and it's the reason why it stuck with me. So anyway, Veronica had a troubled childhood, mostly because of her stepdad. So much so that she tried to commit suicide 3 times in her younger years. She also lost all of her faith in God during this time because she thought if there really was a God, he wouldn't let this happen to her. And you know what? That's a common, I guess, issue for a lot of people when they give up on their faith. It's for that reason. So anyway, fast forward to June 13th, 1981. Veronica is 22 years old. She's driving home from a party when a thunderstorm suddenly breaks out. And it's also at this point that she notices her seatbelt is actually caught in the door with the metal part hanging outside. And the next thing she remembers is the inside of the car becoming very bright because she'd been hit by lightning. And she's dying. She's still in the car, it's still moving, and she's dying, and she's screaming for Jesus to help her. And she doesn't want to die. And then the next thing she knew, she was out of her body and looking at herself, her singed hands still holding the steering wheel. And she just, lost consciousness. And next thing she knew, she was sucked into a tunnel that she described as being something like a canyon. And at the end of the tunnel was a big gate with the words, "Welcome to Hell," engraved on it. She was then led by demons into a big waiting room, as she heard the cries of many, many people all around her, and they were all crying out to Jesus for salvation. And she described the demons as being far scarier and uglier than anything she'd ever seen in a horror movie. She said there were snakes crawling around everywhere, and they were intimidating and frightening everybody. And she also found it hard to breathe down there because she said it just smelled terrible, and there were people crying in pain amongst the crowd. And in the distance, she could see people being thrown into lakes of fire, and some others were being thrown into caves, after which demons would throw spears at them. And with each spear thrown, she would hear a piercing scream of agony that would follow. And nobody, she said nobody should think, and this is what I was trying to reference from before, Ryan. She said nobody should think there is time to convert in hell, because everyone is like they're buried with their own pain and anguish. Like they're too busy with their own pain and anguish. There's just no end to it.
Makes sense.
And she said it made her very sad to see like so many unforgiving and sleeping Christians there. And I think that's an interesting point. Just because you go to church doesn't necessarily mean you're a good person. Anyway, after she had this experience down there, she said, actually, while she was still there, she eventually came to meet Jesus. And she described him as having the nicest features and radiated an unimaginable light. And she couldn't really put it into words. The love.
That guy got to be the busiest dude in the whole multiverse.
Well, I'd say so.
You know, like, Jesus. Well, you know, every time somebody calls his name, every time somebody dies, it's like, you know, oh, I want to talk to Jesus. And the poor guy's like, well, I book you in on Tuesday. You know,
he can't even sleep.
You know, well, geez, there's no rest. Well, I guess. You know, I mean, here, this guy, it's his afterlife too. You know, give him a break.
Well, you know, he's a committed man. But
I see. I hope my guide's George Carlin, but that's just me.
Well, in any case, you know, she mentioned like the love that he radiated, and you know, everybody who's apparently encountered him in the afterlife says the same thing, and they can't articulate it. It's just it's too strong to articulate in a human language. But, you know, he gave her the job. You know, this was why she had this experience and why she came back, I guess. He gave her the job of having to tell everybody what she had seen. You know, a witness to hell and what actually went on there. And he sent her back to her body. And during her entire absence, you know, she said that there was an angel driving her car. I mean, this is why it didn't go off the road or whatever. She came back, an angel was driving her car, and then boom, she was back in her body. And this is the part that sticks with me. It's the very end of the story. For a brief moment, as she came back into her body, her hands still on the wheel of the car, she said she saw her hands gripping the steering wheel still on fire. And that stuck with me. That was kind of eerie.
Yeah, dope.
So that's that story. Yeah, not a good place to go.
That one has so many layers. You know, here you have somebody who's lost faith in God and then gets hit by lightning of all friggin' things. You know.
Yeah, because that's the thing people say. Like if you say the Lord's name, oh, you'll get struck by lightning.
Because that's about as, you know, the next level of unluckiness is being hit by a meteor. You know, like.
Oh, I'll give you unluckiness. This is creepy. Okay, this spooked me. There was a dude. I know this is off topic, but screw it. It's interesting. There was this guy. He was asleep in his bed, and a sinkhole opened up underneath his bed, just big enough to swallow him into the earth. Yeah. And as he was screaming, his brother heard him and ran out, and there's nothing he could do. But I mean, holy shit!
When that happened.
Holy shit! Right?
Yeah.
You're asleep, and the next minute you're like suffocating in the ground. You're
being swallowed by the earth. You know, it literally. You know, that's literally my worst nightmare right there.
That's you know, one of the creepiest.
I'm super claustrophobic, and you know, like I could not imagine a more perfect hell. You know.
Yeah, that's. I don't know if you could top that one.
No, that would get me converting pretty quick.
I mean, a sinkhole.
God, I'm so sorry. Please, all those years.
Yeah.
I don't deserve it. But fuck, get me out of this hole.
I mean, like. Sinkholes generally, I mean, how could it be just perfectly fit? I mean, the rest of the room was intact.
Yeah, right underneath the house, right underneath just his bed. And did you ever see pictures of it?
I did. I mean, yeah, that's a sign, if nothing else. Like, geez, what could he have done? Like,
you. It's like Joseph Mengele from a past life.
Geez, he must have done like the worst thing ever, and had the worst case of karma ever, or somebody did the worst black magic spell ever on him. Either which way, that's like the worst. Yeah, just terrible. But anyway, we're not going to dwell on that because that's some creepy shit right there. Our last story is a user submitted one, and it comes from I believe it's a woman named Jamie, and if it's not, I'm sorry. But
I'm sorry your parents named you Jamie.
Yeah, the way I read it was because it said Jamie. Well, I'm not going to say the other name. I saw in her email just in case she doesn't want me to repeat it, because she just wrote Jamie as her name on the submission. But if I'm wrong, I apologize. I know it's a unisex name. Anyway, her story involves her stepbrother, actually, and it only came into me yesterday. I didn't know if we'd have time to do it, but screw it. I said we throw it into here. I mean, she did submit it because she knew that we were taking near-death experience stories. So this one has to do with an angel's warning. So anyway, as I said, this comes from her brother-in-law is who it happened, and this apparently happened last week. So this is very fresh, very new. Her brother-in-law, we're going to refer to him as John from here on out, has absolutely terrible sleep apnea. And if you guys don't know what that is essentially you stop breathing in your sleep. It can be pretty serious. I mean, there's different treatments and stuff for it, but it's still, you can die from it, right? And he has like the worst case of it apparently, so that's much worse again. And the doctors told him that he has one of the worst cases of sleep apnea that they had ever seen, and it'll probably be what kills him. And his sister, who we're going to refer to from here on as Amy, tells Jamie, and we got a lot of people here, but she tells him that he snores horribly and he wakes up gasping for air at times, and all signs of sleep apnea. And he also stops breathing for long periods of time throughout his sleep. And what she knows is that he has these mouth guards that he uses, but to help with this condition, but they have to be adjusted every so often so that to keep his teeth from shifting. And he hasn't been keeping up on that, so that's not helping him. And he also has a CPAP machine, but he doesn't ever use it because it's so distracting to him. And actually, I got a mother-in-law who has sleep apnea on a CPAP machine and won't use it for the same reason, because it's just so loud.
Well, when the doctor tells you that you get the worst case of disease I've ever seen, and it's going to be the thing that kills you, I think I'd put up with a little...
Oh, hell, me too. In fact, I like a little noise when I go to sleep. I like having a fan on or something like that, just because silence is worse. I like having a little bit of noise. Anyway, he doesn't use it because it's distracting, and I can understand it, I guess, but anyway, he doesn't use it. And, she doesn't know if he's tried other remedies, but for the most part, he's just sweeping all this stuff under the rug, right? Doesn't want to deal with it. And Amy has discussed this with Jamie over the past few months, because I guess it's a growing concern. And last week, Amy told her that he was sleeping and he woke up with what he believes was an angel standing at the end of his bed. And he said that, she had a glow to her. And John said that he was reaching out to her, and she said to him that it's not his time. Again, we hear that often in near-death experiences. And she said that he needs to see the doctor and to promise that he will, and that, she has actually been there to help him through this same, I guess, health issue several times. She's prevented him from dying, and that, she has always been with him, but he can't keep ignoring the problem, and she's not going to come again. She stressed that he needs to promise that he will see the doctor, and, the next thing he remembers is waking up like a normal morning. And when he told Amy about it, she asked if, the being stated that she was an angel, and John said that she didn't say one way or the other, but it's like he just felt instinctively that he knew that she was an angel. And Amy said that, she thought it could be a dream, but he believes it was his guardian angel. And, she told John that she believed it sounded like an NDE to her, a near-death experience. So, Jamie and John, they both agreed that if his guardian angel is, or no, maybe it's Jamie and Amy. Sorry if I got that mixed up. Anyway, they both agreed that if his guardian angel is telling him to see the doctor, then he must really need to go. And she's not sure if he's gone back or not, but, she needs to ask, when the angel always with him but won't be back. Oh yeah, so she doesn't believe that means that the angel won't come back or whatever, but she thinks that he's not going to get another warning. Like, the angels warned him, and now it's up to him to carry that on, right? So
otherworldly beings are generally not too big on repeating themselves historically anyway.
No.
It's not very often. It's like, I told you to take this path and you didn't take it. Now here's a new path, it'll get you to the same place. Usually you got one shot with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I would take the advice. I mean, even if it was a dream, then that's your subconscious telling you that you probably should do it. Right? So
yeah.
Obviously it's an important thing to do. So hopefully John will take that advice and he'll go to the doctor, use a CPAP machine, or he'll, get those mouth guards looked at, whatever he needs to do so that, he doesn't die from a sleep apnea. So those are our 3 stories for tonight, thus concluding our near-death experience week.
Because if there's anything that I think we can take away from all these different stories and all the different things that we talked about, because it's a huge topic, right? But I think if there's one thing we can take away from it, is that this life that we're living here right now, it's a precious thing. It might not seem like that sometimes, but this could be your chance to do something great with your life, and if there's something that you feel that you want to do before you die, or that you should be, or that you should be doing something else other than what you're doing, you really need to go for it, because man, you just don't know when you're going to get called up,
that's just it. I'll tell you this from my work. I basically put tons of obituaries into paper, okay, like tons and tons of them, and I see people very young a lot of times. Like I used to think it was rare until I was working there, and people 30, 40, 50, a lot of people, and a lot of just on a whim stuff that happens. You could be perfectly healthy, normal, exercise, good shape, and just like tomorrow, the car accident, or you're diagnosed with a terminal illness, or you just don't know. It's so random, and it's a scary thought. And for me, like, I don't know what my mission is. Supposedly we all got these missions, but I do like to think that I'd like to leave something behind that said I was here, leave my little mark somehow. It doesn't necessarily have to be this, popular thing in the media. A lot of people leaving their mark is just having kids, or, just something that they do that people remember them by, perhaps just a relative or a friend. And, that's a realistic thing, but I think that, we were put here to use our talents and gifts to bring good into the world in one way or another.
I think that it is a very possible and achievable goal for everybody to find some way to leave this place a little more richer than you first came to it in. There's something that each and every one of us can add to this world, to the lives of our loved ones and those around us, that really could enrich the world in some way.
That's just it. I think if nothing else, I'm my cat's hero, and and my cat absolutely loves me, and my wife, and
and that's pretty much it.
And that's pretty much it. But in terms of my life, for those 2 people,
well, I like to think that in some way, shape, or form that we've enriched the world at least a little bit with our conversations and our ramblings. We're not curing cancer here. We're not feeding the homeless or educating the destitute, non-educated. But we
help cure boredom.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do what we know how to do, right? We're not doctors. We're not, civil defense lawyers. We may not ever be able to affect a large scale change in people's lives in those kinds of, seemingly very meaningful ways. But, if one person, finds some kind of comfort in our stories, finds some entertainment, something that gets them out of a funky mood, then I think that's leaving a little bit of a positive mark on the world, and maybe just enriching this place a little bit more than it was when we got here.
I hope you're right, because that, maybe that'll be the one thing that keeps us from going to hell.
The one redeeming factor, because Lord knows I got nothing else.
It's like,
You're like, yeah, but I'll keep referring back to effed up stories. But effed up stories.
yeah, we told some stories, and some people were a little less bored sometimes. Like, come on.
It'll be a hard sell, but that's.
We'll try our damnedest.
Well, I know I will.
Well, me too. I'll make up shit. It's like, we
I'll
changed
make
lives
up
with this
stuff
thing.
as if they wouldn't know.
Yeah. It's like, people told us, But anyway, hopefully that's the case, because that's all I got, man. That's it. So with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed Near Death Week, as we nearly killed ourselves doing it. 5 episodes in 5 days. It's not easy to do. But we're hoping to do the whole thing again with Cryptid Week. And I'm not sure if we're going to do that next week or a couple weeks after that, because after doing this week, it was a lot of work in one small period of time. But we do have the content ready to go. It's going to be an amazing week of shows, because we got some really killer submitted stories and some really killer ones that we're going to do a podcast on, just to give you a little tidbit, okay? Just a little tinge of what we're going to be doing here. We got a user submitted story that sounds like he ran into Mothman. We got another one who ran into something that was like H.P. Lovecraftian, which I really dug that story. Actually, we got a couple user submission ones with there was one, I believe, with Chupacabra. That story was really interesting. I think
You had a real tough time not saying El Chupa Nibre.
I did. That's what I was thinking.
Futurama.
Yeah. And I think we got a couple other user submission ones as well. I just can't remember off the top of my tongue, but
and I have the coolest Bigfoot story I've ever come across. I'm not giving any details. All I'm saying is that it's the coolest Bigfoot story I've ever heard. I don't think Will has ever even heard of it, and I'm saving it for the podcast.
And one that I'm saving for the podcast that I'm pumped about and I wanted to do for a long time is on the Blackbird of Chernobyl.
Yes.
It has ties to, in fact, they believe it might be the same creature as Mothman, but you haven't heard this one. And there's another story. It's like in a foreign country. And again, a different name, but way more to it than just the Mothman thing. And it also has ties to the Grinning Man. That's going to be absolutely out of this world. And depending on how exhausted I am with research after that, there was another one with it was a Japanese entity that was like almost like localized hurricane like winds. I mean, like big enough to surround a person. That's about as big as it was. But when it went around a person, it would violently, basically cut them up to pieces. I mean, you can't make stuff like that up. I mean, it's just really out there. So, yeah, get some really crazy cryptid stories for you guys. So, again, if we don't do it next week, it'll be coming up shortly after that. And if you have any effed up stories of your own on the paranormal, we ask that you submit that to us at the official website, which is effedupstories.com. That's EFFEDUPSTORIES.com. We'll take whatever you got. We'll put it on the website. We'll put it in a podcast. But we're, for another themed week, we'd like to do one on like Area 51, top secret, like military base installations.
Dream Lake S4.
Yeah, UFO cover-ups, aliens, and stuff like that. So if you've worked in the military and have been under these, been involved with some of this stuff, and you feel like you want to share, or if you're privy to some of this information in some aspect or another, we'd like to hear from you. We'd like to put that out there. It'd be
and we're looking specifically for individuals who've been connected with these kinds of things in somewhat of an official capacity. If you're a scientist or a researcher that's been on some weird project, or a military personnel, something along those lines.
Yep, totally interested there. But I mean, I'll take it if you've seen, or maybe you witnessed a UFO or an alien, or had an experience and you were chased by the Men in Black, or I'm open to that too, because I realize that this is going to be a tough subject to get stories on.
Oh, definitely. Don't stop from or hold back from sending your story in, because if it doesn't get covered, for that week, it'll get covered in another standalone episode, regardless.
Definitely. So with that said, guys, I hope you enjoyed Near Death Week, and I hope you look forward to Cryptid Week. And if we don't do Cryptid Week next week, we do have some other podcasts that we'll put out in the meantime till we're ready to take on that massive project. So with that said, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.
Have a great night, everybody.